Hello, my fellow seekers. Welcome to Into the Work, therapy for empaths, seekers, and the intuitively driven, where you have front row seats to therapy sessions and expert interviews that will help you define the important work that you're here to do. So I guess you actually have something better than front row seats. You practically have a seat on my couch. That's right, you will have unrestricted access to actual sessions with real people, exploring real life issues. You will continue to be inspired by powerful conversations with experts and healers that might just share exactly what it is that you need to hear to get unstuck. I am Michelle Pauverman. I am a recovering people pleaser and former anxiety-driven empath, turned now mostly grounded psychotherapist and intuitive coach. I have been helping people for almost 20 years manage their limiting beliefs and anxiety to finally stop the self-sabotage and step into their gifts. I created this podcast, Into the Work, to give you a place to learn more about yourself and give you actionable strategies to finally move those roadblocks holding you back so you can go for what you want. Above all else, my hope is that this podcast is a catalyst for your awakening. If you're listening, you've already taken a step towards getting off of autopilot, and our next steps together will be taken episode by episode, waking you up to the possibilities, the new ways of thinking and being, so that you can stretch into that next level of your story. The spark has already been lit, and my friend, this is a journey from spark to brilliance. So together, let's light a fire. Today, Lisa Campion joins us on the podcast. Lisa is the author of the #1 best-selling book, The Art of Psychic Reiki, and the award-winning Energy Healing for Empaths, as well as Awakening Your Psychic Ability and Psychic Awakening Journal. She is also the host of the beloved podcast, The Miracle of Healing, that is part of the MindBodySpirit Radio. Lisa is a psychic counselor and Reiki teacher with over 30 years of experience who specializes in training emerging psychics, empaths, and healers to fully step into their gifts. And when asked, why does she do this? You'll often hear Lisa say, because the world needs all the healers it can get. Lisa is totally a testament to this statement, and I've heard her say it a lot. As a psychic counselor and Reiki master teacher with more than 25 years of experience, she has trained more than 1,000 people in hands-on healing Reiki practice and conducted more than 15,000 individual sessions in her career. But I'm particularly excited to have Lisa on the show today because she has been my mentor and teacher at different phases of my journey. And so this sort of feels full circle in a way that feels really special. So I just want to welcome Lisa to the show. Welcome, Lisa. I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. I'm so happy to be here with you. I'm just so tickled that you invited me. And yeah, it's great to be here today.
Well, it's an honor. So I really appreciate it. So I thought I'd kick off our conversation today to talk a little bit about the duality of being an empath. I think most of my listeners here know the basics of what it means for them to be an empath. I'd like to talk about something you refer to in your book, The Energy Healing for Empaths, that double-edged sword. I think you, quote unquote, said something like, when you meet an empath for the first time, you're both like, congratulations, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it is a double-edged sword, because it's such an incredibly powerful gift, and yet it can really feel like a curse. So I think it's for people that haven't learned how to manage their sensitivity yet, where it feels very heavy, very burdensome, overwhelming. It can get so bad that we don't feel like leaving the house, or our world sort of diminishes, like narrows down into like the 3 things we can do without blowing our circuits, right? And that, I feel like there's depression, anxiety, addictions that can come along with this until we learn really how to manage it. And, I think us unprotected empaths live in sort of a constant state of overwhelm, being overwhelmed by our emotions, being overwhelmed by other people's emotions, and that's super challenging. And that's sort of the shadow side of it. But the good side of it is that once we learn how to manage our energy a little bit better, I believe that we are like the healers, caretakers, service providers of the world. I feel like we're here to really help people and to serve humanity in some really powerful, beautiful ways. And my goal for all the empaths is to learn how to manage their sensitivity and step into that powerful side. And then we can sort of walk through the world and do what we came here to do. Maybe that's working as therapists or working as Reiki healers, working as, in hospice, holding the babies in the NICU or doing kitchen table Reiki, all the things that were, I mean, if you think about it, if the world was made of empaths and the world would be a better place. It'd be like we'd all be caring about how each other felt. There wouldn't be any starving children anywhere, or there wouldn't be wars. Like I think we're kind of holding a higher vibe of what it's like, and to live in that state of open heartedness and unity consciousness, right? Like we're feeling like connected to all living things, and it seems incredibly, incredibly, incredibly important on the planet right now. So, and we have some work to do. Right? We have some work to
Incredibly.
do to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really believe that there's so many more empaths being born now than ever. It seems like
Yeah.
I think I've listened to people who specialize in working with empaths, and the beginning kind of see it as like there's just like 2% of the population is empathic. But
Mm.
man, I feel like as these younger generations are coming in, there's so many more empaths that are walking into my office at this point. But I feel like that's all part of the healing of the world, that we need to generate more and more of us sensitive beings.
For sure. I think there's a couple things going on there. So, Michelle, I totally agree with you that there's more. I see every new generation coming in with more and more sensitive, psychic people, sort of, indigo children, rainbow children, whatever we want to call them, that there's more evolved souls being born onto the planet, and that empath nature is a little bit of, part of that. Like as we become more old souls, our empath nature tends to increase. I also feel like because of, there's more conversation in the, collective right now about being an empath. And back when I figured out I was an empath, it was like 1982, and there was no language. That's when I had my aha moment. Like, oh my gosh, I think I'm I didn't know what to call it because there wasn't actually a word. It wasn't until the 90s and sort of the highly sensitive person, conversation came in. Or I remember like being really young and watching Star Trek, and there was an empath on the Star, and I was like, oh my god, I think that's what I am, right? So I think as we talk about it, that was like science fiction. That wasn't a real thing. That was
No,
like,
right? No,
you know,
science
that was
fiction.
science fiction. So, but I think as we talk about it more. There's more books about it and more podcasts like this. More and more people are recognizing that's what they are. They're like, oh, maybe I'm not just crazy. Maybe I'm not just an insane human who like can't control my emotions. And we're realizing, okay, this is a thing. So I think it's both, right? It's just entered the collective conversation, and there's more people.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we talk about, that overwhelm of emotion, one of the things you talked about in your book that I'd love to just kind of bring up, a couple that popped out to me, was just talking about that empathic overload. And one of the things I was going to talk about a little bit down the road here also is how I think this empathic overload, I think it also can sometimes, for some people, almost make them want to say, I'm not an empath, because they don't want to identify with being this weak, overly emotional person. There are people in their childhood, a lot of empaths in their childhood, right, that grew up being told they were too much. And
Yeah.
so they've decided that they are going to be tough and then strong. And so I've had a couple of them come into like classes, Reiki classes and things like that, and saying, well, I don't think I'm an empath. And really realizing, I think they just don't want to identify with this person who's so emotionally overloaded, and it can be seen as a weakness. So I thought we could kind of tap
Mm.
into your topic on emotional overload. One of the things that you said in your book was trapped by being too nice. And I thought that one really will resonate with a lot of people. I mean, they all will. But saying no, this is your word, saying no feels so mean. Empaths often feel as if our very worth depends on our service to other people. And when we set a boundary, a healthy boundary, and choose not to be of service in that moment, we feel shame and guilt. And that just, I think,
Yeah.
is such an issue, you know?
It is, and the empath trap is like when we
Yes.
feel like saying, like it's so hard to say no to other people because we're really in this, like there's just like boomerang energy that happens. I say no to you and then you feel bad. And then I feel all your feelings. So I'm feeling all my guilt and shame, fear around saying no, that I'm feeling whatever your reaction is. Quite frankly, people don't like it when we say no to them, right? So, especially when they're not used to us saying no. And then all of a sudden we start saying no or setting boundaries. And now we have to not only deal with our shame and fear and we have to deal with the backlash, the other person's emotional response. And there's so much energy there that it's, instead of dealing with that, it's just easier just to say yes. Right.
Yes.
So we don't have to deal with all the sticky, complicated, stuff that goes on there. And I feel like part of our empowerment process as empaths is to learn how to sort of hold up to I always say how to tolerate the discomfort other people have when we say no. And I don't mean that you need to tolerate other people's bad behavior. Like if you say no, sometimes when you say no to people, they throw a fit. I'm not saying tolerate that fit. I'm just saying tolerate inside yourself the discomfort, that we feel or that other people feel when we say no. Like people are entitled to their feelings. Like, you don't have to like that I said no, but the answer is still no. And you can't take that out on me either, by the way. But that's so hard, especially when it's your kids or your spouse or your boss or people when we have like really a strong agenda, or we have to get along with them, your in-laws, your parents, like, these tricky relationships we have. We don't really generally like conflict so much, right? As empaths. So I think there's also kind of like learning how to handle conflict without absorbing all this negativity. And that's the empath trap. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes so much sense. And I especially like how you just referred to the importance of learning to tolerate your own discomfort versus other people's bad behavior. And another important thing you talk about in your book is, I thought was such an important thing for all of us to hear, was about our own victim identity. For some of us, there comes a time when our inner victim, which is calling out for others to take care of us, needs to be healed or let go, right? So I giggled a bit when I read about the person who showed up in class. You put this in your book, the person who shows up in class and needs everybody else to make changes in the room so they can be more comfortable. And I think a lot of us have some of that in us and we all have the inner victim, right? Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I can totally speak to that. It's a really common thing that I think, like, first of all, I just want to honor the fact that a lot of highly sensitive people have actually been really victimized. And we all have been in some way. We've all been through difficult things. And, I don't want to diminish that. I don't want to blame the victim. In fact, I think that empaths are often targeted by perpetrators at a higher rate than other people. So sometimes as empaths, we really have to carry the burden of having actually been victimized. So I certainly don't want to diminish that at all. I just sometimes notice that as people cotton on to the fact that they're empaths, or they discover that this is who they are, they can really, I don't know, it's like a little woundology, as Carolyn Mace calls it, right? Where we use what's happened to us as kind of currency, It's kind of like leverage, like, well, I'm way more sensitive than you are. And we have to walk eggshells around that person, or in a way they end up controlling the room, controlling the environment, because we can't step on their triggers, or we can't, say certain things because we're triggered them, honestly. And I think the way out of that is, to be empowered is to fully own that victim side and really take a deep look at it, do some shadow work on how we all run victim energy, because we all do. It's an archetype every single human has. So we really need to understand how we do it and make sure that we're not victimizing other people with our sensitivity, And I see this a lot with the whole energy vampire conversation too, that sometimes, empaths are like the first people to like throw holy water and, garlic at and bring out the silver cross, around people they consider energy vampires. And yet it's the untrained. And I always want to hold everybody's hands when I say this and send so much love, and no judgment, that it's often the untrained empath who's the biggest energy vampire in the room, and let's look in the mirror before we start sort of telling everyone that they're a narcissist, or telling everyone that they're an energy vampire, and making sure we're minding our own energy. So we are fully responsible for ourselves. This is how we get out of victim status, regardless of who we are. you are 100% responsible for your needs, your triggers,
Yeah,
your,
it's such a great.
you know, your emotional regulation, your nervous system regulation. It's on you. It's on you to handle it. And expecting other people to do that for you is incredibly disempowering for everybody. It's incredibly disempowering for them and also for you. So the only way to really gain that empowerment is to take 100% ownership of ourselves. That we as sensitives, that way where we get out of feeling victim and potentially victimizing other people is to take 100% responsibility for our own emotional states, our own emotional regulation, our own needs, our own nervous system regulation, and expecting other people to walk around our triggers and, bend to us, empowering for us and for other people too. So
Yeah.
that's the trick, is to just 100% own it. Like, you've got to own you as an empath, as sensitive, have to figure out how to manage yourself emotionally, how to regulate yourself emotionally in your nervous system. Then once you do that, then I swear, Michelle, the next book I'm going to write is going to be about how do we regulate our nervous system? How do we regulate our emotions? Because I feel like 90% of the problems of the world could be solved if everyone could do that, you
And
know?
because when you say that, everybody's like, yes. And then they're like, how do I do that?
Yeah.
And it's not a quick thing, right?
No.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I think that would be a very good book. And I think it will fly off the shelves because I think everybody's at a point, because there's a lot more people waking up and a lot more people
Yeah.
wanting to do the work. Why we can
Yes.
have these podcasts and have all these people listening is because they're like, I want to shift. I want to feel better. I want to, right? And so, yeah. So agreed. And identifying our victim, whether you're empath or not, is something I think that every human in the world has to do, is understand.
Absolutely. We
It
all
is
have
just-
that archetype, right? Everyone
we
has it.
all do, whether you're an
Yeah.
empath or not. I also think it's always interesting also to look around at what you're attracting, right? So like, are you attracting a lot of these? Why are you attracting this? And I know that you were saying empaths tend to attract these
Yeah.
folks because of their sensitivities and
Yeah. I'm not sure why. I really think it's sort of a boundary issue. And if you're like sort of a predatory, narcissist, psychopathic type, and you look around at all the available options for who you're going to take a bite out of, you're going to probably pick the person that doesn't have such strong boundaries, that's a conflict avoidant, that seems so sensitive. They may be like better emotion, easier to manipulate. And so I do feel like empaths are targeted. Empathic children seem to be targeted more frequently for abuse than, and I don't have any research on that. It's just actually my observation after doing lots and lots of sessions with people and having a clinical practice for a long time. And, one of my own clients told me that she thought she was chosen by a predator because her boundaries were so permeable.
yeah.
And, and because on some levels, the psychologist told me this, somebody who works with people like that, perpetrators, told me, because on some level, as messed up as it is, people who abuse other people want them to feel it. They want to feel, they want to be felt, and it's sort of like a really messed up way to kind of merge or bond with somebody, It's a theory. I don't have any evidence to substantiate that, but I do wonder if it's true.
Yeah. Well, the other thing you talk about in your book as well is just the part of the empath overload leads to overgiving, but also people pleasing.
Yeah,
And so, who better for a narcissist to
better.
target
Exactly.
than someone who wants to be a people pleaser, and how they
That's
find
right.
their worth is through pleasing other
They're
people.
pleasing. And I feel like there's this dance, there's this continuum, the spectrum, with empaths on one side and narcissists or energy vampires, whatever we call them. It's really the same thing on the other side. And that, like any continuum, we attract somebody that is on the opposite end of the spectrum that we are. That's just like the universal law of resonance operating right there, that we get. If you're over here on the empath, you're going to get somebody that's over there on that other side of the spectrum. And that in some ways there's an opportunity there. Doesn't always happen for growth, but there is an opportunity for growth. In the middle, right, is the middle point, is what psychologists call healthy narcissism. That's just having a healthy sense of self-esteem. So we have an opportunity to step towards that middle and develop some healthy self-esteem. They have an opportunity to open their hearts and practice, learn how to think about how other people feel, become more empathic. somewhere in the middle, right? There's this meeting point. And like I said, it doesn't always happen, but I do think there's potential. That's why we keep, and if you're an empath who's been in a relationship with a narcissist, you just know they're going to give you lots of opportunities to set boundaries. By hook or by crook, they will force you to set boundaries eventually, and then we learn. So I don't know. I'm kind of a hopeful person, optimistic kind of person, but I'm always hopeful that there can be growth and evolution in all the encounters that we have. Even if it means you set a boundary and step away from somebody, there's still learning there, right?
Absolutely. We're still learning and growing in that. And,
Yeah.
even in understanding in your own process, I always believe we're right on time. So like even that empath that keeps thinking, oh, this person will do the work to meet me in the middle, that continuum we were just talking about. And they repeatedly don't. And so I think as empaths, we tend to want to give a lot of chances. And that in itself is also part, I think, learning and growing. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to switch us up a little bit because there's a couple topics I really want to get to today that are very juicy. And I know that my listeners will be really excited about us chatting about. And that is, well, one of the things I'm going to start with that I don't even know when you said this. I have it like on a quote on one of the little courses I did. And I have you plastered in little places. You're sprinkled, but not all psychics are empaths, but all empaths are psychic. And that was something you said a long time ago. But I've always kind of shared that message because I think it's when you say that's such a gift to be an empath, it's such a beautiful gift part of being an empath.
Right.
And there's a lot of empaths that because of their smallness or whatever they do to manage their biggest stuff, they say, oh, I'm not psychic. And then we talk to them and we kind of, we get into it and it's like, boom, all this crazy psychic experiences. Yeah. So I thought we could talk a little bit and kind of move into your kind of a little bit of the material from your next book and kind of look at, I want to talk about working with guides, but I also just wonder if we could talk about what it's like for empaths to be psychic and sort of the responsibility that they have to take in delivery of that information.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And I do think it is one of the good sides of it. I not everyone feels that way, maybe, but I do. I think it's super cool. Like it's a kind of a benefit. We get to be psychic. And I think the responsibility part is that if you want to really activate that gift, you probably need some training. So psychic ability is like an ability like anything, like musical ability, athletic ability. People have this idea that you're just born psychic, and you are, but we are all born with a different amount of that gift. But we always need training. And when you look at people who are professional psychics or the psychics you see on TV, they've done a boatload of training. Just like if you wanted to be a professional musician, a professional athlete, we don't think, oh, that person got there without having to do any work. We know they worked really hard to get there. And it's the same thing with psychic ability. It's like a muscle you have to practice to activate it. And so I think that's true. I also think that a lot of times empaths have the full range. Often many have the full range of psychic ability. So it can come in on all the different channels. And I think until we know boundaries, it can be quite overwhelming, right? We're already dealing with enough stimulation just by being out in the world and having to deal with other people, and throwing the psychic stuff on top of it can kind of be the straw that broke the camel's back sometimes. So again, we go back to boundaries. And the good news is once we set boundaries, energetic boundaries, verbal boundaries at work, it doesn't matter if you're dealing with a living person or a dead person, it's going to work. So I think many empaths don't feel safe opening up their psychic ability until they get better boundaries and really learn the energy management basics that are so important. And then when we do, it's super fun. And I also think that sometimes empaths reject their psychic ability because they're feeling everything, it's coming a lot in through the second chakra, that navel chakra, that sense of feeling. It's called clairsentience. And sometimes we may reject that because, well, it's just me being emotional, or that's just always, I'm not seeing anything, and you're not psychic unless you're seeing anything, which totally is not true. But, so we need training, and we need to sort of sort ourselves out a little bit so we can open safely.
Yeah. And one of the other things that you mentioned kind of in line with all this is also one, which I thought was cool in the book, was just listing that sort of percentage that like even the best psychic in the world is only 80% of the time accurate, right?
Yeah.
And that we're dealing with free will and choices.
Yeah.
I don't know if we could talk about that first, but I think that that's really interesting for people to hear about that. Because I know that a lot of my students, when I'm teaching Reiki and different things, they're like, they feel a great deal of responsibility delivering information. And right. And so they feel a great deal of responsibility. And there's this point at which I feel kind of like, you know, that I think it also gives them some freedom. Like they could take a sigh of relief. Like, person has choice, right?
Yeah,
You're not in charge of it all.
exactly. We don't have to be right all the time. We don't have to share all the time. So there's ethics involved that we really, really should talk about too. And when I see things psychically, I'm only ever seeing probabilities, There's not hardly anything is set in stone. We live in a really powerful free will universe and free will dimension. So I'm like, well, 80% probability is the highest I'm ever going to go with somebody that X, Y, and Z happens. But I could tell you that, and 5 minutes later, you could make a different decision. You could,
Mm.
or the people involved could make a different decision. So it's a bit like the weather. 80% probability of rain today, and we don't freak out if that doesn't happen. We understand like prediction, especially when we're dealing with the future. We're just it's like predicting the weather. I think there's things like we're way less accurate when we're dealing with our close friends, our family, our children, and that when you have a strong emotional bond with somebody, your accuracy goes way down. I can never see things about my kids. I can see things about your kids, but if I want information about my kids, I'm going to call you because you're going to see things about my kids, that I can't see. So,
You actually helped me out a lot with that, to be honest.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, we were I'm just going to put this little story in because I think it's really interesting and it adds to this. We were at a singing bowl session and I sat up and I was freaked out because I just watched my entire family go off the side of a cliff in a car. Like it was just a vision. And I looked at you and I go, oh, and you go, sweetheart, are you okay? And I said, I just saw my whole family go off the side of the mountain and die. And you were like, no, you didn't. That's not going to happen. Right. I said, I think it's going to happen. You said, it's not going to happen. And it really grounded me, like, what you're saying, right? Like if it's fear-based, right? How can we tell if it's real information? If it's fear-based, if it's comes with this huge emotional content, it's not intuition, right?
If you're triggered, it's not a real psychic hit. Could be a fear, could be a past life memory. When people say they see things like that, I'm like, oh, well, what did you see? Maybe you just have a fear. Maybe it was something that already happened in another lifetime. That's another possibility. Yeah. And I think with our own families, that's it. If super reactive, super triggery, not a real hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such important for all of us to hear who have a sensitivity. I hear it all the time. Like and why people are afraid of opening up to the psychic stuff because they're afraid they're going to see bad things about their family or they're going to have information they don't know what to do with in that sense. But
people are so afraid. And when I do start psychic development with anybody, the first thing we do in the very first class is talk about fear because we can't really open until we sort of handle that. And almost everybody has fears, like fear that you're going to go crazy or that other people are going to think that you're crazy, fear that you're going to open up and see bad things. Maybe a lot of us had bad experiences when we were kids and we shut it. You saw this dark, creepy thing walking down your hallway, in front of your bedroom door in your room, and nobody believed you when you were a kid. Okay. That's my story, but, it happens. Yeah. It happens for a lot of us. So we think, oh my gosh, I'm going to see that creepy thing in the hall again if I open back up again, or, there's just so many fears that we're even going to attract bad things if we open up. Like, so we're going to attract ghosts and, I can understand why people are afraid because we've had bad experiences or we've watched a lot of paranormal ghost stories and movies and media doesn't help there. Right. And it just never ends very well for the poor psychic paranormal horror movie, does it? That poor tortured psychic. And that gets eaten by the demonic ghost every single time. And I think in our minds, we're like, oh gosh, I don't want that. Who would want that?
Who would want that?
Yeah. Who would want? So I think we need to really break down our fears and kind of look at them, deconstruct them a little bit and unpack that and think, well, is that really true? At this point in my life now, am I really afraid people are going to think I'm crazy or I'm going to attract bad things? And then we go back to psychic self-defense. And because I really never do teach psychic development without psychic self-defense. I would never open somebody up psychically without giving them the tools they need to kind of protect themselves. And then it's like being street smart. Like You're street smart. I'm street smart. I'm not scared walking down the street in New York or Paris or Tokyo, and because I know what not to do. I don't do stupid things. I go with a map, a guide. I walk on the streets that are safe. And when I'm not sure I take a taxi like we do, we know what to do, right? And I think psychic development is a lot like that. When you have the basic information, the basic ground rules, we can navigate through these worlds totally safely if we're sensible and we're not doing the stupid things that we see other people do on paranormal TV shows. So like, don't do those things.
Yes.
But don't use the Ouija boards. Don't, poke around the hornet's nest. But as long as we don't do those things, we're really okay and it's quite safe.
Yeah. Yeah. And how many of us, raise your hand if you ever use a Ouija board, right?
Oh,
Like I'm
oh my
raising my
God,
hand,
yeah,
right?
totally. Me too. Like
It's like,
in junior high school,
it's
your friends
creepy,
sleep
right?
over, right?
Yeah.
That's your friends sleep over in the basement, and the Ouija board comes out, and then,
Right.
shenanigans ensues. But
Yeah.
I mean, if you just did it once, it's not a problem. It's not, unless it is. Unless it does, sometimes it can be, but
Right.
I think it's sort of the basic ethics too of knowing when to say, and that's a super important part of the conversation. Is we see things happen on these paranormal shows or ghost medium shows. I mean, they're staged, right? So they're not real life unfolding. If you see the medium like walk into the shoe store and tell the shoe store lady this message about her grandmother, and the shoe store lady cries happy, grateful tears. Well, that's, been rehearsed. Everyone signed waivers,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not really what the model we want to take, and the ethics of we don't do this, what I call the psychic hit and runs, where we share our psychic information with some poor unsuspecting human who didn't, ask us for that. We go with permission, we ask permission. And I always have it. I just say I have a don't ask, don't tell policy. If you do not ask me, I'm not going to say, unless you're in a session, unless you're a client and we're in a session together. Literally, I would have no friends, Michelle, if I just blurted out every psychic impression I had about my children would not talk to me. I would have no friends, and
Right.
so I just keep my mouth shut. I don't share. And I tell my people, if you want to know something, you've got to ask. And guess what? They never do. They never do, because we just want to live our life, and I'm their mom or their friend, and so, it's really, really, we have to be very, very mindful about how we impact other people with our psychic messages, and just make sure you ask before you share things.
Yes. It's so true.
Yeah.
Because we have been sort of inundated with this obnoxious kind of view of the psychic who just kind of walks in or and blurts it all out. And also, one of the things I'm thinking of right now is maybe you could also point out that drinking alcohol and playing psychic at the party is not always a good endeavor.
No bueno. In fact, psychic development and recreational drugs or drinking is not a good match at all. And I don't have a problem with people doing those things recreationally for fun. Have your glass of wine. Have a little recreational marijuana if it floats your boat. Cannabis is very healing for people's minds. It's a good medicine for a lot of us. But it doesn't mix well with psychic. And so, alcohol blurs your boundaries, drops your boundaries, disinhibits you, makes you say things you regret. We all know that's true, right? And then when you mix psychic in there, it's really not good.
You're going to have a whole lot more to regret.
You have a whole lot more to regret. And it also really lowers your boundaries. So if you're already struggling with your boundaries,
Exactly.
then drinking alcohol actually sort of makes the outer edge of our energy field even more porous. And and you think you're drinking maybe in a club or a bar that's maybe not very high vibrational. And I think part of the hangover we have is like the energy hangover you get from drinking in kind of a low vibe place.
Yeah.
Or with energy, where there's energy that's maybe not so great. One of the worst hangovers I ever had was having a few too many drinks in a casino. And I think part of it was the few too many drinks, but most of it was the casinos, which was really filled with a lot of really low vibe energy happening there. So
I can struggle in casinos for if I stay there too long.
There's a lot of like maybe not such great things happening there, and a lot of sort of addictions, and it's a bit more like we're trying to elevate our frequency and raise our vibration in places like that. So don't really help. And then drinking in a place like that makes you even more vulnerable to
more porous.
more porous, picking up those vibes. So, and some people report that using marijuana in psychic activities can attract astral entities, and it's tricky that one, because oftentimes it makes us more psychic, but also creates again more permeability, and it can be problematic. And don't smoke a lot of weed and take the Ouija board to the abandoned mental hospital. And on Halloween,
That sounds like a
please
bad
don't do that.
idea.
Or if you do that, don't call me
Yeah,
afterwards.
yeah.
Lots of people do kind of stuff like that and just roll around in the practices. And if you want to do ghost hunting, there are safe ways to do it. It is considered a high risk psychic activity, just so you know. And it's hard to be safe while you're doing it. You can do it. Just be really, really mindful. Don't go alone. Be really well trained, and I did it for years, Michelle, the house clearing stuff. So, and I did it back in the 90s when nobody was doing it. This is sort of the story of my life, and because my friend, he was a realtor, had a super haunted house I wouldn't sell. And she's like, can you come over and clear this house? And I was like, okay. Cause I had no
sure.
idea. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what can you do? I'm going to try. And I just made every mistake. I did go alone. I did have no idea what I was walking into. It was incredibly haunted. It was particularly hard. And eventually it took me months to clear it. And eventually I did, because I learned along the way. This was like 1990, 97. It was a long time ago. There was no manual. There was no books written about it. There was no ghost hunting TV shows. I was thrashing and bumbling my way through it and making every mistake along the way, is true for most of my career. But yeah,
like the original Ghostbuster.
Yeah, can be like really dangerous. Can be a very, very dangerous pastime. So
Yeah.
I did it. I got sick. I had,
Wow.
I did it for like almost 10 years, I think. And then I finally stopped because I got very ill. I had spirits follow me home. I just, ran into every single issue and problem you can have. And I saw things I wish I know things I wish I didn't know. I saw things I wish I'd never seen, it really can open us to the darker side of things. And like I said, if that's truly a calling for you, by all means do it, because it needs to be done. Just get really good training.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there are some of us that are, I think it's something you said to me once actually, is that, for instance, I think you said about yourself is that you have one foot in the door of both worlds. So you have one foot in the door of darkness and one foot in the door of light. And then we decidedly said, Michelle, you have both your feet in light. And you don't do
It's not for you, Michelle.
That's not for me. I don't ever get that stuff. I think one time I was doing a healing and I had this crazy, figured face, black, float in front of me and try to eat my face and then go away. And now oh. And then I've cleared, obviously I did all the clearings I could do angelically. And then, I haven't really I don't get that stuff. So people come to me and they say, well, I'm wondering about this dark. I'm like, I talked to my friend Lisa Campion because,
right. Yeah, I have had quite a lot of those experiences and seen a lot of stuff. And, you're definitely in the more of an angelic type healer. And that's great. And you also know how to deal with the shadow. The shadow you're dealing with is people's trauma, and that is, that's ultimately what it all comes down to, really. It's sort of different versions of that, I think.
Yeah. So I want to shift us into our last little bit here, as we could talk all day, I think, about so many really cool things. But I know that, this was a big part of your Psychic Awakening book. And I know that a lot of people are very curious about guides. And so we're talking about sort of the entities and the low vibrational stuff. So maybe we could just end on talking about some of the more high vibrational stuff. Working with guides, and who are these guides? People want to know, right? Did they once live? Who are they? And how can they help us?
Yeah, we all have a team of spirit guides. And I think of it as a team or committee, because I see multiple guides around every person. And they are non-physical spiritual beings whose role it is to help us and assist us. It's really, really hard to incarnate on planet Earth, right? So we wouldn't come here without our team of our bodyguards and our support personnel and our spiritual advisors and our besties. We sort of pack in the support. And And they can be, everyone's team's different, but maybe they're relatives who have crossed over. Maybe they're angels, everybody has at least one angel with them. They may be the ascended masters, people who have reached enlightenment and don't come here anymore, like Jesus, Buddha, Kuan Yin, Mother Mary, Krishna. Like there's many, 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 many of them. Maybe they're animals, power animals, they could be the pets you've had that have crossed over, but maybe they're sort of the spirit of the elephant or the spirit of the phoenix, or that can help us. And they're beings of light that are really beings of pure consciousness, divine beings. They're all kinds. And i I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm constantly seeing new things that I've never seen this before. It's this new being of light I don't quite know how to categorize. And oftentimes there's like one of them that will be sort of the spokesperson for us, They hold different roles. They can be healers and protectors and teachers, companions, the spiritual director who's sort of going to poke you and get you rolling on your path of enlightenment and show you the way, for your spiritual evolution. And I do think it's so fun. And I think that a really easy way to get started with this is to get a card deck. Get a card deck of spirit guides, and that has, or get a bunch of different card decks. So maybe you get an animal deck and a goddess deck and a, angel deck and an ascended master deck. That'd be a great place to start. I mean, it's a lot of decks, but if you start pulling, if you start pulling from them on a regular basis, you'll notice, oh, I have this angel deck and there's 50 cards in there, and I pull the same 3 ones all the time. That's telling you something important that you should know, right? And sometimes these guys are famous and we've heard about them. Oh, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're just, unique to us, or they're not like the famous archangel or the famous ascended master. But that doesn't mean they're not as important or powerful. And it is really, really fun. I think quite comforting to know who your team is and to begin a conversation with them, which the cards can be really helpful for, so that we can receive. I think part of my goal in teaching psychic development to people is to teach them who their team is and to help them communicate directly with their team, so that, and that's why people come to me as a psychic, because they want that information. I'm acting sort of as a translator between your team and you, to give you the direct message they're trying to give you. And I feel like, how cool is it if you can learn how to do that for yourself? And I would love everyone to be so psychically trained they don't need me anymore. That'd be great.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the things that I did want to say that you mentioned in the book, as you were just talking and made me think about it, is kind of said something to the effect of like what guides are not. And one of it was like, they are not responsible for telling you what to do, kind of stuff, right? And like,
Yeah.
I get a lot of people that are very eager. It's like, can you tell me? Can you tell me? Like, so when my clients come in, this is one of the reasons why I kind of slowed down and stopped doing a little bit less of that psychic stuff, is just because there was such an eagerness for people to be told what to do. And I've been trained as a therapist and for so long. And that was like very strict around the boundaries. Like, you never tell someone what to do. Well, that's not how I operate anymore. But there is like a real sense of like a feeling for me when people are just so desperate for someone to tell them what to do. And so I think people kind of go into their guides work sometimes the same way. If you could speak to that at all.
Absolutely. And I'm with you, like, on this topic. I really believe that we should never give up our sovereignty. And our free will is our most powerful superpower as humans, and how we really grow is we choose and we experience the results of our choices. And, I think our guides are here to help and support us, but they're not, they can't do the work for you. They can't take away your karma. They can't fix things. They can't, if you do something stupid, they can't, isolate you from the consequences of that. And because we don't learn, just like if you have kids, you don't do your kids' homework for them because they can't learn. They won't learn if you do that, So we can have sort of this codependent relationship with our guides where we give up our sovereignty and the power of our free will. Now, really, your guides can help you. So when people ask me, what should I do? I'm like, well, let's talk about that. What do you want? And how do you feel? And what do you need? And here are some of the choices that I see for you. Like, here's some of the potential pathways. Let's explore these pathways so that, I think there can be great value in holding space for somebody to explore or here's some maybe potential outcomes. Like if you go down this path, it's maybe, there's a probability that it might be like that. Is that what you want? That we can, as healers and psychics, really hold space for people to look at some of their choices, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that can be
think
good.
that, kind of what you just said, when you were saying maybe one of your goals is to be needed at some point,
Yeah.
right? And I think that really speaks to how healing this work is. It's one of the things I say a lot is that one of the greatest mental health tools you have is going in and learning how to be intuitive, how to
Yeah,
tap into your gifts.
that's right.
And, and when we talk about a lot of this stuff, even working with your guide, like learning how to do that, Lisa, it's such a beautiful, incredible, deep healing gift. And I don't think people even realize that. They think it's going to be fun. They think it's cool. And then they really get into it. And it's a lot of work and
It's a lot of work.
it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. And I always do so much personal development and spiritual development in my psychic classes. And I think people sign up for psychic class, they think it's going to be fun. I'm not saying it's not fun, but I will
Right.
tell you 100%.
There are parts that are very fun.
There are parts that are really fun, but 100% certainty that as soon as you do it, your stuff's going to come up.
Yeah.
And so I've never been able to separate those two. And in fact, one of my teachers told me that psychic ability is a byproduct of spiritual and personal growth. It's what happens when we do spiritual growth. Even, Yusui Sensei, the, founder of Reiki, said that as well. Like he didn't set out to start a healing modality. He created a spiritual practice that was so powerful that when people, he was a Buddhist, and his spiritual practice was so powerful that people uncovered their psychic ability and uncovered the healing ability as a byproduct of this development, personal and spiritual development. So I just think
it's not even the end goal.
It's not even the end goal. It's a byproduct of it.
The byproduct.
Right?
It's a symptom of being well.
That's right. Yes. And being spiritually awakened, and so I always, I've been a healer for a long time and was also trained as a therapist. So I actually love that healing part. And to me, that's the fun part. Like, yes, we're going to teach a lot of really cool psychic stuff, but we're going to get down and work on whatever. And old school psychics called this clearing the channel. And they knew that in order to be a good psychic, you had to get your own issues out of the way.
Yeah.
So you could be a clear channel for the information that was coming through.
Yeah. Wow. This is so great, Lisa. This is so wonderful. Thank you so much again for talking with us today. I feel like we could talk forever, and I just want to make sure I value the fact that our time is running out. So I just want to take this last moment to just put out there, is there anything you want to share, how people can work with you? Is there anything going on?
Yeah, sure. Come by my website, lisacampion.com, and you can find out all about the classes I teach, all levels of Reiki that I call Psychic Reiki, which is psychic and Reiki, psychic development and Reiki smushed together. I teach all levels of psychic development from beginner to advanced to a year-long apprentice program where I train people how to become professional psychic healers. So I've got a YouTube channel, I've got all the socials, all the things. You can find
all those things will be in the show notes too. So everybody can find Lisa very easily.
Right. And all my books are available on Amazon. And I'm just really here to help. So if I can help, I hope you let me know because I'm definitely love to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you for listening to Into the Work Therapy for Empaths and Seekers. Don't forget to grab your free gift, your Shadow Work Transformation Bundle at michellepoverman.com. I've included everything you need to get started to break through the patterns of self-sabotage and finally start to heal the parts of yourself that are getting in the way of truly reaching your potential. From a powerful meditation designed to help you meet and embrace your shadow self, to the guide that's full of curated prompts and important questions to support you on this journey. This really can be the work for you to unmask the root cause of all the issues you've been experiencing, honestly, and start to feel free to believe in yourself and go for what you want. The link for this free bundle is in the show notes. And if you like this episode, I would be so grateful if you could take a moment and rate, click and follow, and leave a review. Of course, you can always follow me on socials at Michelle Poverman. And keep in mind, as you embark on your journey from spark to brilliance, remember, the universe is always conspiring in favor of your awakening. everything that's happening is in support of you lighting your own fire within. So until we meet again, may your path be well lit and your heart be guided. Shine bright, seekers. Until next time.